Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about recruitment processes. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, why is it that small companies use the same recruitment process that is being used by the large corporations? Because they think that the imitation game is the way to success. It's pretty much what everybody's doing. Even the large corporations are doing that. Most of them are just imitating what some other company that is more famous or like classic one is. Everybody does what Google does, or everybody does what Microsoft does, or something similar to that. And usually, I mean, if you think about it, that is what most people are doing. I mean, why do you do things the way that you do? Well, some of it you're probably going to come up with yourself, but a lot of it is just because somebody else told you that that's the way you should be doing it and so forth. And there are so many trends and like famous people around that will tell you how to do things, and people copy what other people are doing and so forth. And the small companies are no different. The thing that I usually argue though is that copying is essential. Like it's one of the most important thing that you as a human can master, because basically I argue that everything usually starts out that way. When you're starting to learn something or you're trying to master a new skill or what have you, you start imitating something somebody else is doing or something else you have observed, and then you do that until you start understanding how it works. And then this is the key moment, then you should start getting your own insights and add your own flavor on top of things, and that's how things usually evolves. And so what your recruitment process usually consists of is basically that. It's just a copy paste that comes from somebody else in many cases. And in some cases you have processes that are more tailored towards the specific company in question, where they might have copied things that they've learned from, like, because as you can imagine, a company is composed of a lot of people, and the recruitment processes are usually made up by someone at that company. And as one of the people who have been part of that and sort of done it, I know for a fact that the recruitment process can come down to as simple a thing as there is a developer who worked at one other company and they did it that way. And so they just copy paste whatever that person is doing, and that's sort of it, right? However, when small companies copy the large corporations, I usually say that it's the same deal. Like it's not like they either have an HR person who doesn't really know anything and they just take whatever somebody else is doing because that is the best they can do. I would have done exactly the same thing. That's literally how I do everything else that I don't know all that well. Like if I'm gonna you know, if I'm gonna fix my dishwasher or something like that, you can bet on that. The first thing I'm gonna do is to go on the internet and see how would somebody else fix that thing, and then I would copy what they are doing as best as I can. And it's the same thing with recruitment processes. And so my guess is that why you're asking this question is because to you it seems a little bit weird that a smaller company would have the same recruitment process as a large corporation. So the problem, to an extent, I agree with this sentiment, because it is for me a little bit weird for a software company to have a identical process to a company that has another set of a different stage, so to speak. So for example, just as I hope we can agree at the very least, like if I'm going to start doing running and I need like a workout regime, like a workout schedule or something like that for getting into shape, I'm pretty sure that it wouldn't be the right move for me to copy paste what like a professional athlete is doing like right off the bat. That could be a really nice ambition to get to that level, but to start off with, maybe once or twice or 3 times a week, or something a little bit more digestible for someone with my fitness level, that would be a good starting point. And so some companies, and not just companies, even software developers, and I've said this before as well, guys, that one of the biggest mistakes people make usually when they're in the start of their career, or even, like, I would even say it's more common at the mid-level, even up to the early senior stages before you get to be a real senior, in my opinion. What you will do is that you will indiscriminately copy what someone else is doing without really doing that other part that I was saying. Add your own flavor on top, because the adding of flavor means that you understand what parts are going to work for you and what's not going to work for you. And that's why you have you have small time application development firm that run full microservices with Kubernetes and like a gigantic super infrastructure and things like that. They have maybe 100 users, and the only reason they're doing it is because they have a bunch of developers who literally copy pasted an architecture without ever stopping and asking the question, do we have the same sort of use case that the people on the tech talks and so forth had when they were pitching this idea to us? And that's the thing I usually tell people, like, it's, if you imagine it as being an engine, if you're gonna build a car and you never once stop and ask yourself, what type of motor do I need for this thing? That's the problem. Or what you're basically doing is you're just taking, like, let's say you used to build race cars, and you take that race car engine and you're trying to put that into like a small little like commercial vehicle that is for, you know, little old ladies or whoever, right? It's the wrong fit. Yeah, that motor is amazing, but it's going to cost you an enormous amount of money to put that into every vehicle, and you're not going to sell any cars. So you're just basically reaching for the wrong tool. And so when you have a recruitment process that usually reflects that is when you see small IT companies behave as if they are Google, where they have, you know, either super strict requirements, or they have screening processes that are like super extensive and things like that and so forth. And it doesn't make any sense to me. What I usually say is that the thing that works, that most companies are doing, is that they usually have a code test and some type of personal interview. That's almost like a sort of basic practice or standard practice. And that makes a lot of sense, because this is the root problem, right? Even if you're not a big corporation, you still have to screen people as the big corporations do. Like they can, like Google and so forth. Like, it's not every big company does this, by the by, guys. Some of them have like truly draconian like recruitment process that makes no sense. And as I said, if you have 100 people, like if you are Google or Facebook or whatever, and you have like hundreds and hundreds of people applying every single day, yeah, then you can put those sort of requirements on people, because you're the big cheese or like so forth and so forth, and people want to work for you. So it doesn't matter what you can basically put them through anything, and they're going to try to do it anyway. But if you're this tiny, small little company and you have maybe 5 candidates coming through the door, like you just have a handful of people, well, it's probably better for you to change your strategy a little bit, because what I argue, and you can quote, don't take this like, take it for what it is, because I don't know if this is the case, but it makes a lot of sense to me at the very least, because we've done a similar thing in other companies that I've had, where the coding test was designed to just screen the absolute beginners out of the recruitment process, because like it was so simple that if you could, it was the same code test for juniors all the way up to seniors. It was the exact same code test, because it was designed with the intention of, this would be the bare minimum that we need from a software developer in order for them to even be able to work in this company. And it was designed that way, just to screen out people who have no chance of ever like working for us. But if you go with some companies who do like these really heavy computer sciencey questions and so forth, it's usually, as I said, it's because they're copying something that they don't truly understand. And in many cases, I argue that you will be better off if you do it the way I was suggesting. You take a simpler code test or something like that, and then you do the personal interview. Or you can even reverse it sometimes, which I will also recommend, because basically, as you've seen in my other recruitment or like interviewing videos, what I usually say is that in order for you to hire good software developers, you basically have to have a senior level software developer who is part of the interviewing process, because otherwise it's basically impossible for you to determine if they have the skills or not. And so just doing the copy pasting thing, I would not suggest to do it, because as I said, like personal interviews and so forth is usually the easiest way to figure out if someone is qualified. Even you should always have the code test, I argue, as well, but in which order you're putting it really comes down to how many people are you getting through your pipeline. Because if a small company designs a pipeline that is the same as for large corporations, yeah, well, if they're still getting a lot of applicants and they're all willing to go through it, well then okay, it seems to be working for you, even though it seems a little bit weird. And if it's not working, that probably is something that you want to change. So what I want you to take away from this is that small companies basically do whatever the big boys are doing, just as you and me, and like anybody who's ever wanted to do anything will copy from somebody who is better or like more famous or so forth and so forth. I do exactly the same thing. I'm pretty sure you do exactly the same thing. And in some cases, it makes a lot of sense to copy exactly what somebody else is doing, and in some cases, it's not really a good fit. But if you don't know any better, then that's the best you can do. So my suggestion to smaller firms and so forth is that you do need quality people, and that's the hard part, right? Because this is a talent business. It's not like you can't think about software developers as toilet paper or something like that, where it's like it's the same for everybody. You're just trying to find the cheapest whatever, right? It's really, really different, and every single situation is the same. You, regardless of if you're Google or you're a small company, will need some of the best depending on what you're doing. Like if you're doing if you know your business, you have a really low threshold for what your customers need from you, then you don't have to have the best. But in many cases, you do have to have really, really good people, so you have to test them. And the large corporations, they might take an even longer, like a really, really extensive period. That's not necessary, I argue, in many cases, but they can, because they have the demand and people really, really want to work for them. For smaller companies, you do have to do quality checks and so forth. But my argument is usually that if you have a fairly straightforward code test, it doesn't have to be like gigantic thing, because the thing I've said 100 times before is that I don't care who does it or who shows me the code or so forth. I argue to you that you can basically not determine with fairly high accuracy how good a software developer is based on the code test alone. You can determine if they know how to code whatsoever, if they're completely incompetent, if there's like an extreme gap. That's something you can determine. But the difference between someone who is okay-ish to someone who is like really, really masterful is really, really tricky to tell. I argue that it is for me. And so instead of trying to create like a super, super complicated coding test to sort of weed out like the best of the best and so forth, try to approach it with this way. Create a code test that reflects the reality of your work situation at that specific company, and then have a interview with the person so that you can figure out their seniority level, because that is I argue the easiest in a personal interview or something like that. And this is what Google and the others are doing, like the big corporations. Like they do more things than that, but they are doing these things as well. But you don't have to go all the way and like just copy paste all of that stuff. Think more in terms of what makes sense for your company. How do you make sure that you have a good person? That's the key thing here, right? And you can, I argue, figure out with fairly high accuracy how good someone is without putting them through like the whole 9 yards with like these gigantic processes and things like that, especially if you don't have enough people coming through the door. Have a great day.